You know, humility is a pretty easy thing for many of us. Last night, we had a baptism, and I was sitting over and getting ready to stand for the gospel. And as I stood up to get the blessing from Father, my cell phone fell out of my pocket and went clattering along over by the font. So I went over, retrieved it, put it on my seat, and then I went to Father for the blessing, and he was so distracted by my phone sliding across the floor, he forgot the words of the blessing. So we both stood there looking at each other while he was trying to figure it out. I'm embarrassed, he's embarrassed, and finally, I think he just made something up and gave me a blessing, and off I went. And I thought, wow, I spent all these hours getting my homily ready, and it's undone by a cell phone. Just like that. I've been teaching for a long time, 35 years. And every single day before the first day of classes, I can't sleep. Are there any other teachers in here? No other teachers? A few. Do any of you have that, where you can't sleep before? No matter how many years you've been doing it, you're anxious about it. It's humbling to have that kind of sense of nervousness. And I think we all have that kind of sense at times. Any parent, you think you got everything in control, and then you have children. And it's all out of control. But what does humility have to do with the good news, with the gospel? How is it that Jesus would include this little teaching of humility in the course of teaching us about God's unconditional love? Well, I think we have to look at the readings from last week and the reading for next week to kind of understand that. Remember last week, the narrow way? Father John talked about the narrow way. And the narrow way is not being narrow-minded. The narrow way is not being narrow in heart. The narrow way is the way of God's love and mercy and forgiveness that opens our arms, opens our hearts to others. Why is it the narrow way? Because the world often tells us, get angry, get revenge, be in it for yourself. The narrow way, though, is a way of love. Not a way of condemnation, not a way of judgment, but a way of love. The narrow way. Now, next week, we hear the reading about the cross, and it says, everyone must pick up their cross and follow me. Because sometimes we go through life and we stub our toes against all sorts of issues in life. And we carry that cross knowing that Christ is there with us. The cross reminds us that we're never alone on the journey of faith. So what does that have to do with humility? Well, think about it. The narrow way is not just my way. It's the way God has shown us to live. I have to submit myself to God's will and let go of my will. If you remember back to that story in Genesis of Adam and Eve chose pride, chose their way over the narrow way, chose their will over God's will. Pride kept them from being humble. Now, the word humility gives us the same word as earth, soil, to be grounded. That's why a lot of times we'll kneel down. We're grounding ourselves in God's love, in God's way. And sometimes in our struggles, we're brought to our knees. We are humbled, and it brings us closer to God and God's presence. The cross, in our humility, we have to be willing to say, I'll take it on my shoulders. I will follow you no matter what. I will carry that cross that has been handed me. So humility ties together the narrow way and the way of the cross so that God can constantly lead us with his love and mercy and forgiveness through the struggles that we face in life. And humility binds that together, being humble. Now, each of us has our own unique narrow way. But Christ is there with us. And love binds us to Christ on the narrow way. And in humility, that's what we embrace. We are very fortunate today, a young woman who spent time here at St. Pat's, who has traveled around and been most recently at Florida State University. She's here to talk a little bit about her own narrow way. The narrow way that has led her to the way of the cross, led her to relationship with Jesus Christ. So Molly, I invite you to come forward. Molly Clavenna, part of a military family here at St. Patrick's, and with the Skillman's kind of focus, she found the narrow way and came to have a relationship with Christ. I'd like you to hear a little bit of her story. And for all of you who are young people, preteens, teenagers, realize that God has a narrow way for you as well. So Molly, come on forward and tell us your story.
Hello, my name is Molly Clavenna. I spent 7th and 8th grade here at St. Patrick's School and 9th grade over at Bellarmine before I moved around to a couple other places. And luckily my family's back here now, so it's with joy that I get to share with you a story from my middle school years. One evening at middle school youth group here at St. Pat's, we were led in a candlelit procession from the parish center over into the church and entered into a time of adoration of Jesus present in the Blessed Sacrament. In that moment, I found stillness and quiet, but most importantly, I was able to sit in the back of church and gaze up at Jesus in the Eucharist and realize that that was truly Christ present in the flesh. I encountered a lot of peace that day. In 8th grade at St. Pat's School, we were asked what we wanted to be when we grew up. I went to write down my interest at the time to be a brain surgeon, and I realized that a word came into my heart and my mind that I hadn't heard before. This word missionary popped up into my heart. I didn't know what that word meant, what that occupation entailed, but I knew that the peace in my heart was certainly something worth sharing with my graduating class, and so I wrote down missionary. This peace, the presence of Christ in the Eucharist, and a missionary spirituality have taken me down a windy road of discovering love for service and youth ministry, especially through retreats, missionary opportunities at summer camps like Camp Wojtyła and Life Teen Camps. Now I'm a recent graduate from Florida State University, and I'm going into a full year of Life Teen missions to be formed as a missionary disciple to help lead teens closer to Christ. What joy this has brought me to be able to see Jesus working in my heart since the beginning back in middle school and leading me up till this point. I'm here today because St. Patrick's has been a place where I've encountered Christ, and what joy it is to come back and share those moments with you. With that, I would love to extend to you a personal invitation. If you are a teen, I challenge you to be bold and give Jesus a chance in choosing and committing to a regular prayer life and a great community like the youth group here at St. Patrick's. If you have or know a teen, encourage them to find a Christ-centered community. It changed my life, and I would certainly recommend it. Lastly, I invite you, teen or not teen, to come meet me after Mass. I'll be in the hallway. I would love to share with you more about this upcoming mission year. Thank you, and may God grant you the peace and joy He's brought me here in this place.
Each and every one of us has a narrow way, and whichever way it happens to be, God promises to be there with us. Molly has found her narrow way. Each of us needs to find our own. So I invite you today, as we come to the Eucharist, as we continue to experience Christ in community, in word, and in the very sacrament of His presence with us, I invite you to search for that narrow way, the way of love and mercy and forgiveness, to pick up that narrow way in humility, to follow it, and to carry whatever cross you have, because it will lead, as it did Molly, it will lead to joy. So God bless, and remember constantly, go, be church. Amen? Amen.